Hey friends, are you unsure of what to say on social media or what to even send in your weekly emails? Well, what if creating content could be easy? Would you be looking for a shortcut to creating consistent content? Yes, consistent content, because you know consistency is key. Well, let me tell you, you are not alone when you feel like you're struggling on what to post or what to write in emails. And we know that you have that product part of your business down. But as you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know that to get more people to your products, to buy your products, you need to create great content. Oh, I know. I keep saying content, and that's the dreaded C word. And we can't tell you how many product bosses tell us that they want to create great content for their audience and their customers, but they don't know what to say, or they are so busy they can't find the time, or they really, really, really don't want to be the face of their brand. Well, no worries, because that's exactly why we created a year of content. It is your shortcut to creating consistent content that resonates with your audience and brings more loyal customers who can't wait to buy your products. If you want to see how easy this is and how easy it is to create content for your audience and your customers, head to www.ayearofcontent.com.
Welcome to the Product Boss Podcast, where we help product-based businesses grow their sales and improve their strategies.
Hey everyone, I want to introduce you to my co-host and biz bestie, Mina Kunlo-Sitep, an Amazon guru that has built a multi-six-figure product-based business.
In introducing the other half of the Product Boss, Jacqueline Snyder. She has helped launch and grow over 500 fashion apparel and accessory brands, even one of her own.
And together, we share our inventory of secret weapons that will help you dig deep and do the work it takes.
Are you ready? Let's build together.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Product Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Jacqueline Snyder, with my incredible co-host, Mina Kunlo-Sitep. Hey, Mina.
Hey, Jacqueline.
We're really excited to have a very special guest on with us today. We have Marcel Schwantes. He is an international speaker, executive coach, and syndicated columnist, attracting over 1.5 million readers monthly to his thought leadership. His work has been featured in Inc., Time, Business Insider, Fast Company, the New York Daily News, CNBC, Forbes, and many other global media outlets. We're so excited to invite him onto the podcast. He has shared virtual stages with Mark Cuban, Damon John, Michael Strahan, and so many others. Well, welcome to the podcast, Marcel.
It's a blast to be here. I'm glad we can have this conversation.
Same. I think you're going to add so much value to our listeners, and really as they start to think about leadership. So you host the wildly popular podcast, Love in Action. So tell us a little bit more about your podcast.
Right. So that podcast started with, it was really born out of my thought leadership of if you want to have strong leadership and strong company cultures, it starts with human empowerment, right? Well, I went a little further than that. Nobody's actually calling human empowerment and employee engagement by what it truly is, and that's you care for your employees. You build them up and you nurture them, and you create paths for careers, and you help them to flourish in the workplace. Because when you do that, as business leaders know, that creates value and it leads to great business outcomes. But nobody's calling it love, care, empathy, compassion, respect. You hear all those terms being sort of tied into leadership and or servant leadership and those great company cultures that we know about, like the Southwest Airlines of the world. But when you start to look under the hood, the employees are well taken care of. They're loved. And so I went where nobody else has gone before, I think. From a business standpoint, I think there are many, many podcasts out there with the word love in it, but not one that actually talks about the business world. And so I named it Love in Action, which is the skills that we need to have, the human skills or the essential skills that these days, or used to be called soft skills. Now they're essential skills. Really, the hard stuff is what used to be called the soft stuff is what leads to loving behaviors, which then translates to good business outcomes. So love in action.
I love that so much, pun intended there. And
She's a comical one, this one.
I know, right? What I really love about that too is that really what we're really starting to see is just this combination of taking care and loving on your employees, and they, and in return you receive that, and then it also spills over into your customers. You really build that into your business. I'd like to kind of chat about it from like a small business standpoint. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that as getting to be more of what will happen in, the rest of the year, or, what year is it? 2021, 2022. As we move forward, as small businesses are getting to have more access and getting to grow themselves, what do you think would be a great tip for them? Or where do you see it going as well?
Well, this is such a great kind of open-ended question, Mina, because you brought me in here, and we talked offline a little bit, like how important it is to talk about the leadership and the culture side of growing and scaling a business. Because what I find in my 20 plus years of doing this and looking at client exit data, exit reports, why people quit and things like that, it always go back to leadership. I can say quite confidently that probably over 80% of the time when I look at why people leave companies or why companies fail to scale, it goes right back to leadership decisions, the lack of the right leadership talent at the top, right? So in this day and age, so if you're in a kind of startup mode and you're growing, the first thing you need to do is you look at the values that you have instilled in your organization. A lot of entrepreneurs that I've worked with that have a great business model, they're going through several stages of funding. They start to grow like crazy, and to keep up, they have to hire people like crazy, right? And therein lies the problem, is that they don't have a baseline of who to hire based on a set of shared values that people will agree on. Hey, we're going to make decisions based on something that my first few employees and the founders and the partners, et cetera, agreed. This is who we are, and these are non-negotiables for us. Even if it means that you're going to walk away from a business, so be it. And so the first thing that I always say is, what are your core values as an organization? And do those core values match with the personal values of the founders and, those first employees?
So speaking of core values, which is such an incredible point, because we've shared this with our masterminders and with our students, is that sometimes when you're hiring, you might hire based on values versus actual skills, because you can always teach skill, but do their values align? We had hired someone a few months back that everything looked good on paper, right? The resume was perfect. The interviews seemed appropriate. But then when that person started working within the company and the company culture, we saw that the culture actually shifted, that people who had worked with us for years were acting kind of funny. There was dominance in the conversations. There was the values
it's a different dynamic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And we actually realized very quickly there, while on paper, this person was the things that we needed from a values perspective, it didn't align. And it was actually going to do a lot more damage to the company than if we kept them and tried to. You can't really instill values in people, right?
And unfortunately, so you probably brought on a rock star that had a lot of maybe technical knowledge, was skilled in some area, but had influence over the culture. And that person, now I'm speaking in generalities. When you bring somebody like that, because they're a rock star in some area, technical, functional, but they don't match the values, their toxicity seeps in through these outside forces that, unfortunately, because they were not aligned with your cultural values, it's like a cancer growing inside the body, right? So you need to cut it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a quick question actually from a small business perspective, and this is from personal experience. So I've had my own business for 15 years. This is my other business outside of the one Mina and I have together. And when it's a small business, and let's say it's a very small team, it might be you and one other person. Sometimes what happens there as the leader, especially, I'm going to generalize as well. I'm going to say maybe from a woman's perspective, there's a friendship that's formed. There's a personal, when you say coming from from a loving perspective, from heart-centered, I think sometimes it's hard there to, as a leader, what's heart-centered versus what's too friendly or too interpersonal, where it starts to really mix that dynamic. Because when I had hired somebody, it was very hard to let her go because I was concerned about her personal life, her lease, how is she going to pay her bills, because we were friends and I knew more about her business or more about her personally. And so letting her go was the right thing for the company, but from a personal level, it was really hard. So I'm just curious for these smaller business owners that maybe have one or two key people, how they can step into that leadership role and be positioned in that way and still lead from a heart-centered place, but then it doesn't crisscross into that personal relationship as well.
That's a tough one if you only have one employee, right? Because
Right.
you're probably already best friends with that person. It might be somebody that you, I don't know, grew up with and decided to start a business together. So if you're growing as a business, I think that you have to have some kind of something to shoot for that keeps you aligned with the business and leave the personal stuff out of the way. You know what? You can still be friends, even if it doesn't work out, right? You can agree that we have a business, so there's a business relationship that happens during working hours, and then have boundaries around that. What are acceptable behaviors? First, as a leader, right? What are some boundaries that I need to set for myself as a leader that I'm not overstepping on this other employee? And I think but that's a real tough one, because if you only have one person, and maybe it is the leader to say, okay, well, I need to have a kind of a come to Jesus meeting with you about how we should interact when we are inside our corporate walls, or whatever that means these days, over Zoom, because the business is at stake, and sometimes relationships, or being in the wrong kind of relationship, will hurt the business, right? And you know how all of the emotional aspects of relationships, like any relationship, right? Whether it's with a partner, a spouse, a best friend, it's up and down. Sometimes you hurt each other's feelings. You step on toes. There's conflict you have to work through. Well, that can happen in a business, right? But it shouldn't. I mean, there are things that should not happen in the way of two friends getting together and all of a sudden having an argument that has nothing to do with the business, but it's during business hours or during the time you work on the business, that is going to affect you emotionally to the point where you may not perform as well, or may not be in the right mindset to now, work. And because you got all these other personal issues.
So it sounds like very clear boundaries.
Clear boundaries,
Mhm.
absolutely. And clear expectations for, hey, this is how we conduct ourselves when we are doing work.
So when you're thinking about values and how to really begin a culture, I think a lot of people start and a culture seems a little bit further away if you don't have a team yet, but you do have to kind of start at the very beginning thinking of what you're wanting to build. So how do you get to that point? How do you actually know? Are there any tips for, how do you know what the values could or should be? Are there any exercises? How often should you do them? What could you give as like a starting point?
Yeah, that's good, Mina. So we teach in our courses that obviously start with what are our foundational organizational values. And again, that could be you take maybe a couple of co-founders and maybe the first employee, you get together and say, okay, what's going to be those values that are going to shape how we make decisions, how we conduct ourselves with each other, with our partners, key stakeholders, clients, customers, et cetera, right? And agree what floats to the top. And then now you have sort of a set criteria. And then as you bring new employees, you make sure that they align with your corporate values, and then test it out, right? As you scale and grow and you bring in more employees, you test it out and see because you might bring in a person that has this unique set of skills and a way of seeing the world, or maybe even a way of dealing with customers that could become a new core value that's going to work to your advantage as a business. So you want to always explore and probe other people for what they bring to the table, right? What unique set of eyes are they looking through the world with, right? So So then you can expand on the values and then reiterate that same exercise. All right, let's take a time out. Okay, we've grown. It's 6 months later, a year later. Are we still what we said we were a year ago? And if not, what's important to us right now? Okay, great. And then the other thing that I think that people miss out on as far as shaping culture is that there are work behaviors, actual traits that lend to success on the job. So, pick a position that you're hiring for, and then hire based on the traits you want for that position. So, if you're hiring a salesperson, well, salespeople are by nature outgoing and good people person and proactive, self-starter type of people. So you want to make sure that now you're designing a job description, and I'm not even saying just on paper, but I'm saying like, you're designing this work around this ideal person that you picture in your mind as going to be great for this position, whatever that is, sales or social media strategist. But at times, though, we don't know because we don't have any record of, well, what would be a successful person for this new position of ours. So you got to get a little creative. Maybe talk to competitors and say, hey, what has worked well for you guys for XYZ position, and what traits lend to success on the job? And you can start there. And then as you grow, now let's say you got 10 employees, 15 employees. Now you can get your top performers in a room and say, what is it about you guys that you're so good at what you do? So it's not about the job description, right? That's nice. That's HR stuff and you post it out. But no, we're talking about the day-to-day stuff that gets them up in the morning to rock on that job that they're doing, or to just wow their customer, right? So those are the intangibles. It's the traits that lend to success. It's the stuff that you don't really, sometimes it flies below the radar. You have to kind of get to understand the person and the human nature of somebody that's doing the work to say, okay, now we can kind of replicate this person that's with us, right? That's a top performer and hire based on that. So now you kind of have you already have a sort of a human template for who you want to bring in for any position. And and then rituals, right? I mean, a culture is to have a healthy culture where people respect each other and they share their values. Usually they have these customs and these rituals that they do together that feels like a family, like feels like they belong. And maybe it's diversity, right? So what's a ritual that every month, every week, every day, if diversity is one of your values, how do you demonstrate that we are a diverse organization where people's different voices are respected, and we want to hear your voice on new ideas, et cetera. If that's a value, then you need to demonstrate it, right? Mm-hmm. You need to reinforce it over and over. So then you may come up with rituals. Maybe it's, I don't know, during your lunch routine or your morning huddles, et cetera. So,
question for you, Product Boss. How much time, effort, and money do you spend promoting your business each year? Do you feel like it's paying off? Are you getting tons of visibility, or do you feel like you're struggling to get more eyes on your products? This is exactly why we created the Small Business Shopping Directory. The Small Business Shopping Directory is an all-in-one place for customers to shop, discover, and support small product businesses every day. It's a place for you to be visible to new customers and get discovered. The Small Business Shopping Directory is the #1 small product-based business directory that gets your business in front of thousands of customers who want to support and buy from small businesses just like yours. It's a perfect way to get your products in front of eager buyers this season without having to spend thousands on ads. Our goal is to get you more visibility and to get more eyes on your business. And here's the best part. We're doing this together. The directory is a way for small businesses like yours to join forces and create a big impact because customers can finally find you online and offline. They can support you with their purchasing power. It will take all of us to create this movement of supporting small, and we can do it together. So, are you in? We invite you to join the Small Business Shopping Directory. This is your personal invitation to get listed today. You can get up and running in just minutes. So don't wait. You can join now and get your listing by heading to shop1in5.com and click on the link to get listed. And that's where I was going to go with company culture. You know, my background is the fashion industry in Southern California. And a lot of the times where we saw company culture really push forward was in the surf and skate industry. So for example, I think my friend worked for Quicksilver, and during the summers, there was like Friday beach days where they went and then they were able to take surf lessons, for example, as a
I'm
team.
so jealous.
Oh, Southern California, but surf lessons. And so it was the idea of like, even if you were, you know, I was a swimwear designer. I didn't come from the surf and skate culture, but let's say they hired me because I was talented in that way, then I could have then gotten into the culture because that idea of also knowing the culture you're creating for your customers, your consumers, that you want to live in that sort of world. And I think sometimes Mina comes out of the advertising industry. My friends that used to work in the advertising industry, I remember going into one of their huge, beautiful offices because we're talking small businesses versus these bigger businesses. And they had collaborative rooms where they all could sit down at, you know, whether there's coffee and beer served, you know, that's part of the culture. But like you said, it stems from the founders. What do they want to create? So as smaller businesses, I mean, we're a smaller business. I think we have about 15 to 20 people working for us right now, which is getting bigger, and we're a completely virtual team. I love this idea of company culture, and maybe we can talk about that a bit on ways that we might be able to create that virtually, because I think sometimes in person it makes more sense than virtually creating company culture.
Yeah, for sure. When I worked in the advertising agency, I did overflow work. So I didn't participate in these. I viewed them as an outsider. I didn't love to participate because I always felt like it wasn't for me because I was a contractor. But they had every Friday, they would have Corona Fridays. Now, this is pre-COVID, so this is a different type of Corona.
It's not coronavirus, it's a coronavirus.
Well, I'm on a roll today, I got to say. So they had Corona beers, they had lime, all that stuff. And then on the other Fridays, like one Friday a month, they would have bring your pet in. So everybody would bring in their dogs, or one person would bring in their cat, which I didn't love, but I was allergic to it. So, but it really bonded people together because they were able to see like a lot of people cared for their pets, or they would, you know, it was a modern version of the water cooler at an ad agency because it was Corona beers, you know? So I thought that was really cool. I love this idea of, a ritual. I think it's innately when we do this, you know, as moms, I do this really with my kids, like the peach in the pit. Sometimes people do that, or, you know, what's something you're grateful for the day. It could be very woven into, a business. I know that one of the journals that I did or had for the next 90, it was what's a weed and what's a seed. And then Larissa Loden, who is our mastermind, she started picking that up for her company. So I love this idea. I think it's excellent, Marcel.
You know, and I want to touch on something because we got to make sure that as we hear about rituals, people tend to associate rituals with, you know, those nice perks, right? Like you think of Google, great culture, and you got all these perks. You know, they have their nap pods and their climbing walls, and I mean, you already mentioned, you know, bring your dog to work day, and you got the free food, the coffee, the free massage. We're in the COVID era, sort of although a lot of us are going back to a hybrid environment, and some companies are actually going back to work full time. I mean, in the office, right? So whatever the case may be, is important that if you have rituals and people are having fun and there's cool perks, but you got 60% turnover, well, it kind of defeats the purpose of having any of that stuff, because you have to always tie it to business outcomes. You have to tie it to people flourishing at work. You have to tie it to high performance, right? So it's not just, I hate my job, but hey, tomorrow we get to have a Nerf gunfight or whatever you call it, you know, Nerf war. I'm actually using a real life example from a previous company about 10 years ago.
Are they in Silicon Valley?
And that I'm not, but that was happening here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I'm from. And I was still back in those days in the corporate world. So I got to see why people were quitting their work. And this company, the word fun was one of their core values. But they were kind of forcing fun to happen, with these cool little games. We had the Nerf war one time and we had a blast running around, shooting each other, right? With Nerf guns. But yet on Monday morning, things were exactly the way they were on Friday. People are dragging into work. They're hitting their boss. They're hitting their work and going through the motions. And so when we talk about rituals, it's really tied to a culture that is a high-performing culture because they have great leadership and the people are taken care of. And that's what makes a great culture. And then the rituals and the perks are sort of the icing on the cake and a cherry on top.
Right. So then if you can't get into the specifics, but what was then off at that company that made it that, Friday and Monday just dragged and people dragged in? Like, what was the disconnect there?
Share secrets with you now.
Okay. No one's listening. Don't worry.
Oh, just between the three of us.
Yeah, just the three.
Well, I looked at the exit interview reports because I was doing them. I was the spearheading talent management, talent development, and the number 5 reason why people were quitting was because of the CEO. At that time, that CEO is a toxic person. Brilliant strategist, extremely creative, but was a horrible leader. And I had the data to prove it. And so that was one of the reasons.
But that was fun taking that to the CEO.
Yeah. And to see is, as you would imagine, if you take something like that to a CEO who is a bully, he's not going to take it too well. He's not going to back down from that. So that was not a good experience. Mm-hmm. And that led to my own resignation. So I added myself to the exit interview report and left. And about not even 6 months after that company folded.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So there's a little bit of self-doubt creeping in as a CEO of my business, for example, because sometimes we don't know, and this is probably speaking for our listeners as well, are we toxic to our employees? So,
short answer, no.
No, but I'm trying to say, like, there's self-doubt that comes in where you're like, because I think then sometimes as a business owner, right, because you're so personal, it's the idea of like, am I nice enough? Like, should I tell them when they're wrong? It's self-doubt as a leader because we have to learn to be leaders. We're not born, it's not something that's just like poof, one day you wake up and you're like, hey, I'm leading this company. Right. And so I guess there's that idea there of like, self-development, self-reflection, we all have different personalities. So maybe the team we're creating is aligned with a different type of personality each, right? I know I live in New Jersey now, and New Jersey is very different than LA. So, right. I've had to adapt my personality a bit to like just being with different like cultures of people. And I say that in the way of just like, it's that East Coast mentality. Like, why are you talking to me? You're so chit-chatty LA person.
And chill.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love this question because really, it has been a learning experience, even for myself and Jacqueline, being kind of thrust into leadership. It was something we were building, but definitely something we're developing. So what are some traits, some exercises that our small business owners could work on that might help them facilitate becoming better leaders and leaders that people want to follow?
Can I share our secret sauce with you guys?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, and by the way, it's totally okay. We're humans and we're imperfect. We're not, everybody makes mistakes, the best of us. And sometimes we suffer from what's called imposter syndrome. And if you're there, just cut yourself some slack and realize that, we're all on a learning curve here. There is no perfect leader. And so the leadership is really a journey, right? There are stops along the way on the path. And just when you thought you arrived at the top of the mountain, well, guess what? Look up again.
Sounds like parenting a little.
Exactly. Because sometimes you are parenting, kids in at work. And I say that, metaphorically. I mean, some employees are going to act like kids. So, but if you want to have a baseline for how to be a good leader, you have to have a criteria and always go back to the research. So everything we do is evidence-based, and we're not just picking stuff off of this book and that TED Talk and that YouTube video. And so the criteria that we come from, that we are informed by what great leadership looks like, is servant leadership. And so that's, kind of a counterintuitive, and people are like, servant leadership, the word servant rubs people off the wrong way. And right now you've probably lost about 20 listeners. Sorry, apologies in advance.
Come back, everyone.
It's just us three, remember? We're just us three here.
So I always point to then, if you want to build a great company culture or a leadership culture, it's going to be that is going to attract your employees and retain your employees. Then the science that we are informed by points to 6 key behaviors. And so these are really building blocks. If you want to build a company around leadership, this is what they are. I'm going to give them to you right now. Okay. So number 1 is you want leaders that display authenticity. So that speaks to, I won't get into too much detail, or I'll be here for an hour, but it's display authenticity speaks to vulnerability. It speaks to how transparent are we with each other, with our customers, and authenticity is all about building trust, right? I think that people miss the point that if you are showing vulnerability, I mean, Brené Brown has her whole research on this and has written multiple books on this. Vulnerability builds trust with people because now they are also willing to be vulnerable as well. And it's still seen as a soft and fuzzy word, but it's really kind of a buff masculine. When you look at the most successful leaders, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, etc., they don't hold back when it comes to when they have to give the bad news, good news, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're authentic about what's really going on, and sometimes you have to say what needs to be said and not sweep things under the rug. And talk about your failures as well. Great leaders talk about, hey, we're in COVID times, so there's a lot of mental health stuff going on, and leaders are suffering with the rest of us, employees as well. And so it's okay for leaders to just kind of remove the mask and be real. Don't compartmentalize your feelings because now it's 8 a.m. and now I have to engage my staff. So I'm going to put on the boss mask or the founder mask, right? No, don't do that. Actually, just integrate your whole being and bring that to work. No, I'm not saying that if you are a jerk, that you show up as a jerk to work, right? But authenticity just means being emotionally honest with what's really going on, whether you got good news or bad news. And people will learn that the words match the actions with my boss, my whoever. So they begin to trust you on that emotional level as well. They begin to connect with you because there's trust there. The second, going back to my secret sauce, what we teach, this is in our course. So it's value people. So servant leaders value people. That's the crux of why you're going to be a servant leader, is you meet the needs of others, right? So value people, there's so many things that you can do to value your employees. We already talked about a few of them. Maybe bring in some rituals to and hire people on values, and then reward them for exemplifying good behaviors and showing good values, etc., in their decisions, right? So, and valuing people can be lots of different things. I mean, how do we value people these days? There's the lines between work and home are blurred. We're working out of the house for a lot of people still, like remote work. And so valuing people is valuing their time that, hey, just because you're accessible 24/7 doesn't mean that I'm going to infringe in your personal time or call you on weekends. I value your family time or the time you have with your dog, right? And so that's valuing people. Just one example. The third building block of servant leadership, if you're going to build a leadership culture and build yourself up as a leader, is to provide leadership. So that's more of the hard side of leadership. So you have to have accountability. You have to set the right expectations. You have to have clear goals and measures of success for your people. So that balances out the servant part, right? You still demand excellence and you hold people's feet to the fire. If they violate those values, well, you're not only hiring based on your values, but guess what? They're non-negotiable. So you're going to have to fire somebody for violating the values. And I've consulted clients to say, well, they were on the fence. Oh, Marcel, we don't know. Should we fire this person? Okay, well, Mr. Client, tell me your values again. Respect? Okay. Does this person respect your fellow peers, coworkers, and customers? Well, not really. Okay. Integrity is your other value. Does this person act in integrity? Okay. By now they're like, okay, Marcel, we got the point. Next day he's gone. So that's, you want to be able to. That comes from the provide leadership, because when you demonstrate that you have boundaries, that even if you're a rock star and you're billing tons of hours, hey, it's more of a detriment to have a person that violates and brings toxicity into the workplace than keeping that person on. So you got to cut somebody loose that does not reflect your values and is not walking the talk. All right, so that's the third one. So the fourth one is now that you're providing leadership, direction, setting goals, expectations. Well, you also want to share your leadership, and this is a tough one, ladies, because if you're coming from a top-down command and control hierarchy, well, guess what? You're going to have an allergic reaction to sharing your leadership, huh? No way. I'm all about it. I'm all about telling people what to do. I don't want to give away my power. Well, in sharing leadership, you have to give away your power. And in doing so, you're raising up the leadership of your culture by pushing your authority down. So now, in sharing leadership, it solves the micromanagement problem. You never have to micromanage someone if you're actually helping that person and giving them new skills and raising their competency so that they don't have to come to you, the boss, all the time about, hey, what should I do? Hey, boss, what do I do in this situation? No, because that person has the freedom and ownership to make decisions on their own. But the reason they can do that is because the boss says, I believe in you, and I'm going to build you up and give you the right skills to go and just do your thing. You don't have to come to me. So that's share leadership. It's just pushing that authority down and releasing your control, releasing your power, and giving it to others. Fifth is you got to develop your people, plain and simple. People need to grow. They are naturally wired to grow. Biologically, it's in the science, right? They don't want to stay stagnating. And even if they want to stay in the same role for 20 years, there's still ways that you can help that person grow within that role or in the company by increasing their responsibility. So it's not just like upward mobility and going up the career ladder. No. It's growing as a whole person, professional development and personal development, right? So that's the fifth one. And then the last one, we rounded out with the leadership trait of, and again, this is team leadership, right? So some of the concepts I gave you go to self leadership. This one is definitely team leadership. It's building community. So build community is all about fostering relationships and reinforcing relationships between peers and coworkers to have a healthy culture. And And so this is helping people to feel like they belong, and that they are connecting. I mean, especially if you're 100% remote, how are you going to make sure that if that is even a value, you got connect or we belong as a value statement. Well, how are you exhibiting that, in your culture to reinforce those values? So building community, it also talks about diversity and inclusion. So big terms now, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, buzz terms. So that speaks to building community. You want a diverse culture so that people that have different voices, they're still a community, but they're sharing different ideas and opinions and expressions coming from multiple sides, not just ethnicity, but genders, sexual orientations, age, generations, right? So you want to that there's strength in diversity that actually, according to the science, leads to really good business outcomes. In fact, a diverse group will outperform a group of subject matter experts time and time again. So really, it's those six, that's what we start our conversations with. And then and we coach people then to develop these awesome cultures based around those 6 principles. And that's our secret sauce.
I love it. So extremely helpful. I feel like that gives us kind of a roadmap into trying to create a healthy and happy culture. So thank you for that, Marcel.
My pleasure.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's I came out of I worked for a very toxic business. And so when I started
formerly,
not this one, years ago, but that was one of the main reasons I started my business. And for me, a value was that I will always work with people I like. That was actually like the number one reason I started my own business. So if I ever hired anybody, the people around me, even my customers were people that I liked, like you said, they didn't infringe on certain values, even if it was a retailer, that was extra special in terms of personality. If it didn't align, then it wasn't worth the headache or how it would disrupt the company. So I really resonated with so much of what you said. So thank you for sharing your secret sauce with our listeners.
Thank you. Yeah, I wrote notes while you were saying that. One quick question I was wondering is that, how you said there are certain values, how front facing should that be? Should it be internal or external?
Definitely, both, but don't shy away from external, because you want to be brand ambassadors. The people in your organization are going to be good recruiting sources for you. If they are bragging about those values, then put them out, hang them out on your front door, right?
Let me give you a brochure. It's like the DoorDash guy.
So I'd love for you to share with our listeners how they can, if they're interested in your course, because it sounds incredible as they're developing leadership in their companies, how they could sign up for that, where else they can connect with you and listen to your podcast.
Yeah, best way. Thank you so much. Best way to go and learn more about it is on my website. So that's marcelschwantes.com. If you Google my name, you're going to end up pretty much all over the place.
We'll put it in the show notes. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Because I'm about to I wasn't about to spell the name. But marcelschwantes.com will land you there. There's a sub-tab called Virtual Training. And then in there, you can engage with me, watch a little video, and then schedule an appointment, only 15 minutes long. And I'll just share more about what the commitment is. And, we're taking people in right now. So
amazing. So exciting. Thank you for creating that and for helping teach leadership in this way and from a value-based way. I think it's so appropriate for where the world is moving, for where we are today in 2021 and where we're going to go. It's really going to change workplace and workforce. So they can listen to your podcast, Love in Action. Is that everywhere we listen to podcasts?
Okay. Apple Podcasts, Google, all over, Spotify, and on my website, Love in Action tab on my website will get you there as well.
Amazing. So everyone go subscribe. Thank you for sharing so much with us. And again, we're not going to, it's just between the 3 of us, right?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Marcel.
This is a blast. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and listening all the way through the Product Boss podcast. If you love our show and it has helped you in any way in your business, would you mind doing 2 things for us? Subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. Reviews help other product entrepreneurs know that this is the place to be to grow their businesses and realize that they're not alone. And we know that you all know that a 5-star and honest review helps you sell more products to more people. So you know that your reviews help us reach more listeners around the world. Remember, what we give is what we receive, and we are all about helping each other in the Product Boss community. We are all in this together. We would be so appreciative of you if you could take the time right now to subscribe, leave a review, and even share this episode on social or someone you know so we can impact more lives. And remember, subscribing means that you will get notified each time we release a new episode so you never miss a thing. You have helped us grow and climb into the top 10 of all marketing podcasts, and together we can keep climbing. Thank you, friends. And remember, there is room at the top for all of us. This episode is brought to you by the Shop 1 in 5 Pledge and Small Business Shopping Directory. It's a commitment to make 1 in 5 of your purchases from a small business online or offline. So head to shop1in5.com to take the pledge. And friend, while you are there, check out and shop from hundreds of small businesses in the Small Business Shopping Directory. It's the go-to directory to discover, support, and shop small businesses all in one place. Head to shop1in5.com.